just like mom's watching now. You have to study. So we have to study now, okay? So last class, at the end of last class, we were talking about stem and leaf, okay? And you know, it's pretty much similar to other frequency distribution like bar chart, okay? So you can look at the distribution, you know, how many numbers linked to the stem 1, stem 2, and so on. Okay? So in typical frequency distribution, you can consider this one, each of this as a class. Okay? And you can, by looking at the length of the line, you can quickly grasp the idea about the distribution. Okay? But one clear benefit here is not only the length of the bar, we can actually see actual numbers. Okay? So while all these numbers, we have 8 numbers here, okay? And apparently they are 16, 17, 18, 19. Okay? So if you have just a mere class here, all we could see would be just the length of the bar. Right? But from here you can see there are no numbers between 11 and 15. And all 8 numbers are greater than 15. Okay? So you can see that detailed information about the distribution. That's one clear advantage of stem and leaf. Yeah? And as I said, you know, stem doesn't have to be just 1 digit. Okay? If you have 3-digit numbers, okay, then you can use the first 2 digits as the stem and the last digit as leaf. Okay? But you have to make sure that you have to indicate that the stem, you know, what the unit for the stem are. Okay? All right, let's go on. Let's move on. All right, histogram. This is, now we are moving to the, well, we are in the numerical data. We're talking about numerical data, quantitative data. Okay? And this is one of the most frequently used chart or graph. Okay? And it's pretty similar to bar chart. Okay? But we're talking about vertical bar chart, and there are no gaps. This is one clear distinction. In bar chart, you could have vertical bar chart, but as we've seen so far, since we've been dealing with categorical data, you know, we had gaps between bars. Okay? They were not connected. Okay? But now we are dealing with quantitative data or numerical data. Okay? There will be no gap because it's 10, 20, 30, 40. Okay? We don't have to have gap. Okay? So using the same number, we can create this histogram. Okay? On the horizontal axis, you can write down class boundaries or class midpoints. So instead of writing 10, 20, 30, 40, you can write down 15, 25, 35. That corresponds to the center of each bar. Okay? As long as you make it clear, that's fine. Okay? The whole idea of presenting the data or descriptive is to make it make sense, because you are trying to convey the information contained in your data to your audience. Okay? So use your creativity, use your discretion, and just make it clear so that you can convey the message and information clearly. Okay? That's all that counts. Okay? Vertical axis is the frequency, relative frequency, or percentage, depending on what you want to present. Height of the bars presents the frequency, the same information. Okay? So again, the idea of histogram is to provide a quick idea on the distribution or information about distribution of the data points to your audience. Okay? Let me go through some examples here, okay, and show you exactly how we can create histogram on Excel. That's my note. I'm going to do this slowly so that you can remember. And again, if you don't remember, you can watch the video. Okay? And you might find it very rather tedious. Okay? It's a very simple or elementary task. Okay? But as I said, this is a quite important skill. Okay? The concepts are important, understanding the concept of distribution or standard deviation or hypothesis testing. These are, of course, important concepts. But in your future career, when you actually start working for a company, you may use the skills to create these charts more than the understanding of distribution. So let me go here. Okay. The actual data for this example comes from bond fund. Okay, I think one of your Excel files will be titled bond funds. Well, maybe no space here because it's a title. Okay? So this is actual data. And we're going to be using this data many times throughout this chapter and in the following chapters as an example. Okay? And this is investment fund. Okay? And we have 180 different types of funds listed here. The first variable, well, you don't have to worry about this fund number. It's just the artificial number. Okay? And the first variable here is type of the fund, the intermediate government bond or short-term corporate bond. Okay? Well, I guess some of you may have no idea what bond is about. Okay? Bond is IOU or IOU. Okay? So it's a statement that you have borrowed money from someone. Okay? So government can borrow money from usually public. Okay? It's called 국채. Okay? So when government needs money, they can borrow and issue government bond. Okay? But also the private companies, corporations, usually borrow money from investors. Okay? So we're talking about two different types of bond: intermediate government bond and short-term corporate bonds. Okay? And of course, there are many different types, many other types. Okay? But here we have only two types listed. Okay? And the next variable is assets. Okay? That's the total amount of value of the bond issued. Okay? And maybe this is $1 million, $158 million worth of assets issued. Fees, whether the fund manager or management company charges fee or not. Okay? Some of them charge fees, yes. Some of them charge no fee. Okay? So that's it. Expense ratio, usually in percentage. Okay? So if you invest in this fund, they manage this fund to make it, larger. Okay? To make profit or return on your investment. Okay? But for that service, many of the funds charge fees. Okay? So 0.61, for example, will be 0.61%. Okay? So they charge, if you invest in, say, $100 in this fund, okay? Every year they're going to deduct 61 cents out of your money, okay? As a fee. Okay? Return in 2008, Okay, so what was the actual return in 2008? Okay, 7.6 means that you have made 7.6% gain or return on your money. Okay, so if you had $100 in the beginning of 2008, by the end of 2008, the size of the money, your fund, would have been $107.60, right? 3-year return, that's the 3-year average return, okay? And the 5-year return, 5-year average return, okay? And then risk level, how risky this investment is, okay? Depending on how, what kind of companies they invest with this money, okay? What kind of stocks they buy, okay? You can have high risk, low risk. Typically, government funds are pretty safe, okay? But corporate funds are riskier, okay? Usually they invest in, and so on, okay? In more risky or riskier investment, okay? Okay, so that's the information contained in this data, okay? And let's say using any numerical, you can use any numerical data or quantitative data to create histogram, okay? But I think typically we use, say, 2008 return, okay? So can we create this kind of histogram using the 2008 return values, okay? Well, first thing we have to do is we have to have, before we create a chart, we have to have something like this distribution, okay? This is a cumulative or relative frequency. You can have actual frequency, okay? So we need to have these classes. Okay? And last class we talked about this, okay? The general rule or rule of thumb was, well, usually between 5 and 15 classes. Right? So in order to do that, we have to first figure out the range. What's the minimum number? What's the maximum number? And you divide the range by the number of classes you want, okay? And then you will come up with the class width, okay? So we're trying to come up with these boundaries, lower and upper boundaries for each bar or each class, okay? And in Excel, we call it bin. So let me write down details here. Okay. So first step is create bins. Okay. Bin is just a space. If you have in your room, you may have this furniture, right? You can put your socks, shirts, or all kinds of things here, right? So these spaces are called bins. Okay? A bin in Excel contains all numbers that are less than the bin number and that are greater than the previous bin number. Okay. So what we are going to create here is something like this. Somebody already created bins for us. Okay? And Excel needs this column, okay, to create a chart or histogram. Okay? And apparently, if you look at the actual return numbers, okay, some numbers are negative, okay, because the minimum, the smallest number is negative 35.01. Okay? And so we haven't seen the entire data here, but let's see if you go down there. You see, as I told you, the corporate funds tend to be more risky or riskier. Okay, so some of the funds apparently lost a lot of money. Here you go. Yeah. So some corporate funds lost 31, almost 32% of the value. Okay? So how would you create bins? Based on what we've talked about so far. It's just like we are trying to create the classes, right? So what do you need to know in order to come up with bin numbers? What was the first step? If you want to create a frequency distribution, you need this table first, right? Classes and how many numbers are in each class, right? And we're trying to come up with these classes, right? So what do? Come on, wake up. What do you need to do? What do you need to find out first? Okay, so we're trying to come up with the boundaries here from some number to some number to less than some number to less than some number, right? And that's what we're trying to do, right? But what was the first step doing that? First, yes, you have to find the range, right? Because you come up with these classes, or first decide the class width, right? Width of each class from, how many numbers it's gonna contain, right? We divide the range by the number of classes that we desire to come up with the width of each class, right? So in order to come up with the range, what you need to do is sort this number, right? 정렬, right? If you sort these numbers, then you can see what's the minimum number, what's the maximum number, right? And then you divide that range by number of classes or bins you like, right? And apparently here, well, it looks like they set it up by 5% width, right? From negative 35 to negative 30 and then negative 25, right? So here in creating bin, we have to do here's a slight complication here, right? The definition of bin is less than bin number and greater than the previous bin number, right? So that's exactly the same idea here, because if you go back to the table, right? It says 10 but less than 20. So it includes 10, but it does not include 20. Includes 20, but does not include 30, right? So the upper limit has to be slightly less than this number, So the bin number, apparently here, the bin number is the upper limit for each class, right? So So that's why they specify something like this, negative 35.01. Okay? So slightly less than negative 35, right? You understand that, right? We're in the negative range, so negative 35.01 is less than negative 35, slightly below, right? And here the last mean number is 1999, right? So upper limit would have been 20, but we have to make it slightly less than 20, right? So 19.99, right? So you can create the bin numbers that way. Any question? Make sure you understand how to create bin numbers. Okay. All right. So you can type the bin numbers in any column, right? So here we go. All right. The next step is go to data analysis. We're spending a lot of time doing this, and I know this, as I warned, this may seem a little bit tedious and elementary, right? But because we're starting this is the first time we're creating chart, and we'll show you. And as you get used to this, we can go faster, and I'm sure you'll get better at this. All right, and select histogram, and select ranges, and then check chart output. Okay. What do I mean by that? Is go back to the data table here, and here click on data, and at the end there's data 분석 or data analysis. Okay. And then select histogram. Okay. And then you have to select the data range. Okay. So just highlight the data you want. Return 2008. Include the title. And highlight the whole thing. Alright, here we go. And then 계급 구간. This is in English bins. Okay. So you have to specify bins. Okay. And we have bins written down here. So highlight the bins. Okay. Here, notice that the minimum number, the lowest number is negative 35, or 1, right? But as you've seen previously, looks like the among actual data numbers, 2008, the smallest number was negative 31, right? So you have to specify the lower limit. This is actually, as I said, bins are always upper limit, okay? So that's the upper limit of each cell, right? So why do we have this? If you do that, there will be no observation in that cell. Do you understand what I'm saying? Okay. We have the minimum number we know is 31 point whatever, negative 31.1 XX, right? So if you specify bin number with something up to negative 35.01, right? There will be no number. This bin or class will be empty, right? But we still need to specify that number, because this number serves as a lower limit for the next cell or next bin. right? If you do not create, if you start from negative 30.01, right? Then there will be no lower limit for that bin. It could go to negative million and billion, right? So the idea is that when you create the frequency distribution or histogram or bar chart, right? The classes should have the same width. You should have the same width for all the classes or all the bins, right? But so in order to close the lower boundary of this bin, the second bin, we need to create this kind of null bin number. We know that there will be absolutely no number in that bin, right? And what about this bin? Of course, this bin will have no lower boundary, but it doesn't matter because we are not going to use that bin. Okay? The minimum number here is just created just to close the lower boundary, lower limit of the second cell or second bin. Okay? Well, you'll understand as we go on. Okay? So anyway, here what you need to do is specify the entire bin range. Okay? And since we have included title or labels here, make sure you check label here. If you don't check it, then computer will beep, and it will say there's something wrong. There is non-number data in your selection. Okay? All right, and then so select the ranges and check chart output, chart 출력 here. Make sure you check chart output, and you can choose 출력 any existing sheet or new worksheet. Let's choose new worksheet and go here. All right. All right. So the data analysis just created this table here. Bin numbers, okay? And again, these numbers are upper limit, okay? And of course, there is no observation in the first bin, okay? One observation in the second bin, and so on, okay? And based on that, the computer created this chart, okay? It's not histogram yet, okay? Because according to our definition of histogram, what's wrong here? Right, we have some gaps here, right? So we have to eliminate gaps first. Okay? And secondly, these numbers are not correct. Okay? These numbers are in between the eyes here, okay, or markers here, right? So looks like these are midpoints, okay? But that these are not really midpoints. Okay? So we need to do a couple of things here. Okay. Create midpoints column. Create midpoints column. Okay. And you can do it here if you like. Okay. Just type here midpoint or mid. And of course, you cannot create any midpoint for the first bin because remember, first bin has no lower limit. It's completely open. You have no idea what the lower limit is, right? So what you need to do is maybe just type something, apostrophe and hyphen, 3 hyphen, just to indicate that there's nothing there, okay? And then, what about this midpoint of the second bin? What will be the midpoint? Any idea? What will be the midpoint in the second bin? What's the center between negative 35.01 and negative 30.01? Negative 32.5 something, right? Something like that. So easiest way you can do that is just type equals average. Average. And I like this too, so negative 32.51. Okay. Well, you can just drag it down all the way if you like to copy the formula, right? And if this one bothers you, you don't have to, but you can format the number. Go to format cell. Okay, and number. You can say 1 digit below the decimal point. Alright, oh. We don't want that, right? Cell format. Negative is like this. Alright, good. So we have midpoint, right? So, instead of these numbers, we can use these numbers. In order to do that, just right click here. This maybe I should write it down. Because again, this is the first time, so I'm not going to be this tedious next time. Right? I'm sure you will get the idea what to do and how to do with the other charts. Because once you have these skills, you can apply it to many different types of charts and graphs and whatever you do. Right click on the horizontal axis. Select data, and edit horizontal axis. Sorry about my writing, but I'm sure you can read it, right? So right click here, format axis, here, data selection, and then edit, and you have to specify the axis label. So instead of this, we want to use this, alright, and then say OK. OK, here. So now we have nice looking midpoint specified. Negative sign. Alright. Well, let me show you how to do this. You can, you don't have to, but if you want, you can make it a little bit more visually pleasing. Go to here. What was it? You can turn those things around and make it 45 degrees. And I think this is it. Here. Let's say negative 45. I think that will work. Well, it doesn't make it any better here in this case. Well, maybe yeah, that looks a little better. Okay. So we took care of this one problem. One problem is, instead of the incorrect bin numbers, right? We just replaced it with the midpoint. Okay? So this bar corresponds to the right midpoint number. Okay? And then we need to eliminate the gaps between the bars. So for that's the last step. Right click on a bar and select Format Data Series and select Format Data Series and then eliminate the gap. Okay. So right click on any bar, Format Data Series right here. This is supposed to be a Format Data Series, and the gap, make it 0. There it is. Okay. So here we have nice looking histogram. Okay. You can try many different things if you want to make it, if you want to submit it to your boss, of course you have to make it better, right? Instead of saying histogram, you can change it to whatever, 2008 return. Right? And then here, how do you change this? I'm sure you can change that. In the worst case, you can take out the whole thing and just insert the text box here and say the frequency or relative frequency, percentage, whatever you want. Okay? So you can do that if you like. And here, yeah, instead of pins, you should say midpoint. Midpoints. Something like that. Right? You can make it, any way you like to show your graph. Okay. And of course, if you like, you can insert the lines here separating each bar. You can spend some time and master the tricks. Okay? Any question about this histogram? So, I guess the most important step here was creating bins. You have to know how to create bins, okay, and how to use that to create histogram. Okay. Alright, so let's move on to the next. Here we go. Polygons. Similar concept with histogram, okay? But instead of histogram, it shows the distribution using the dotted line. Okay? And the same concept here, right? But here, let's see. Why don't I just write down the steps and I'll let you try that at home. Okay? And if you have any problem, I'll be happy to advise you. Okay. Maybe instead of writing, I'll just go through this. Okay. There you go. So, if the polygons are similar to histogram, why would you use histogram? What's the definite of the each type of charts. Okay, but frequently we use this Polygon to compare two different categories. Okay? So we have intermediate government funds here and the short-term corporate funds here. Okay? And when you chart their distribution, you can see some difference. Okay? So it looks like you can make a comment. While two funds show similar pattern, right? Relative three funds have negative return, right? And most of the funds have positive return, okay? And it is, in statistical terms, it is skewed. Okay? It is skewed to the left, okay? Which means we have more observations on the right side of the distribution. Okay? But clearly, the short-term corporate funds have slightly less return. Okay? So more of the short-term corporate funds are concentrated a little bit less, maybe about 0% between negative 2.5 and 2.5% range return. But the government funds tend to have a little bit higher return. Okay? So by putting two graphs together, you can make quick comments, you can make quick comparison, okay, of the distribution. Okay. So, well, you have to create bins like this and create the midpoints that we did already. Okay. And you can use the histogram function to come up with this distribution, right? Let me just show you how to, just in case you forgot. Okay, so go to data analysis, histogram function, and this time we need to separate two categories. Okay. So I'm going to just highlight, okay, first 90. I know there are 90 funds that are intermediate government. Alright, so we stop here, okay, and then new chart, let's say new worksheet. Okay, and you have to specify bins, but we already did here. The computer still remembers that. Okay, so bin numbers selected here. All right. So this is how that first two columns are created. Okay. So if you look at here, if you have very small size data, you have just a few observations. You can actually count, right? You know how many observations belong to each bin, right? But if you have large data, maybe thousands of rows, you know, this is, of course, a lot easier and quicker way to do that, right? So you can create the frequency distribution using the histogram function, okay? And all you need to do is do once again and repeat the same thing, data analysis. And this time, instead of 2 through 91, you can specify through 92 through 181. I know that there is the last number is on the 181 row, okay? Because we have 180 observations, but the first row is labeled, okay? So we can do that. And that's how we got this second distribution. Okay. So once you come up with this distribution, you can have the midpoints. Okay. And you have to create percentage column. Oh, incident. Hold on 1 second. if you want to do just the frequency polygon, you don't need percentage. You can actually have actual frequency. Okay? But I was working on the next step. Next one is Ogive. Sorry, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. It's taking a little too much time. Okay? But I think I keep telling myself this is useful. This is useful in helping you. Okay? But, well, you'll find it useful. Okay? So just bear with me. Be a little bit patient with me. Okay? Cumulative percentage polygon is called Ogive. Okay? Ogive is an architectural term. Okay? When you have a dome ceiling in architecture, okay? In order to build a dome structure, you have to have a support structure. Okay? So this support structure is called an ogive. Okay? So it comes from the shape of this frequency, the cumulative frequency polygon. Okay? It shows the cumulative frequency, so up to 20 we have quarter of 45, up to 30 we have quarter of 70, and so on. Okay? So we have, in order to create the ogive, you need to create the percentage. Alright. But here, let's just create the frequency, just raw frequency polygon first. Okay? And you know how to do it. Just highlight two columns here and insert line chart and line chart with a marker. Right. That's how easy it is. Right? You can create two frequency polygons like that, okay? And you can easily compare. And of course, again, if you want to make it look better, I'm going to assign some homework problems on Thursday. Okay? So when you submit your homework problems or report, maybe you should do this kind of thing. You make space like this, and you can do insert text box and insert the title. Okay, and then whatever you make changes that you want. Okay. So that's just showing what you can do. Okay? Alright. For an ogive, you just need to create one more column. Let's say cumulative percentage. Okay. What do you need to do? Let's say STC, use STC. Okay. So cumulative frequency for the first cell is of course equal to the first cell here. Okay. Equal to this one, enter. And then here you know what to do. Equals this one plus this one, enter. Okay. And the rest you can copy the formula by dragging it down. Okay. Yeah. I don't know what happened. We have 89. We're supposed to have 90, but somehow we are missing one. But well, that's not the point here right now. So here, so we have total of 89 here. Am I missing something? Oh, here. Let's see. Let me write it down. Oh, not really. That doesn't take care of this. Anyway, So now we need to convert these numbers into percentage, right? So you can say, what am I created here? Equals this one divided by 89. Right? Alright, so now we need to convert it into percentage, nice looking percentage. Format, where's format? Number, here, percentage, and let's say just one digit below the decimal point. Alright, so now we have nice looking cumulative percentage for all these cells, right? So all you need to do is highlight these numbers and go to insert line chart. Alright, okay, that's on Ogive. Okay, so well, of course you can enhance the graph by inserting the title and whatever you want to say here. That's how you create an Ogive. Any questions so far? Alright, thank you for being patient here. Let me just do a couple more things today. I really like to get to this pivot table thing. Okay? You will like it. Yeah, not many of you have seen those tricks before. Okay, on my channel. Okay. All right, so let's see. Scatter plot. Scatter plot are used for numerical data consisting of paired observations. The scatter plots are used to show relationship between the two variables, like x and y. Okay? So if you have, say, whatever number of hours spent studying and your exam score, right? Then by jotting down the data points, right, you can quickly see the trend. Okay, so what table do I use here? Okay, pivot. Okay, so let me go here. Close this thing. And pivot. Okay, here we go. So we have, again, part of the bond fund data. We have expense ratio, return 2008, 3-year return, 5-year return, and so on, right? So suppose you want to check whether those funds that charge fees promise any better return. Okay, so here expense ratio and return, right? So let's see if there is any relationship between expense ratio and return, right? So all you need to do is just highlight the two columns. Okay, and enter, scatter. You can choose whatever you want, but let's try this. Okay, what do you think? Do you think there's any relationship between the 2008 return and the expense ratio? Those funds that charge higher fee or expense, right? Do they promise higher return? Doesn't look like, right? It doesn't show any particular trend. Okay. How about, let's say, let's say, how about return 2008 and 3-year return, right? Let's try this. So, you know, the question is, if any fund had higher return in 2008, does that indicate the fund also had higher average return in the last 3 years? Something like that, right? So you can say, again, insert, scatter. Well, here we have pretty clear pattern, right? So by creating scattergram, you can see the pattern or relationship pretty quickly, okay? You can do a couple more things. You don't have to do this for this class, but in the next class, I mean next semester, many of you will take Introduction to Econometrics, okay? And at that time, you will learn what we call regression analysis, 회귀분석. Okay? Regression analysis is nothing but line fitting, okay? So through this data points, we're trying to find the best fitting line or equation of the line, okay? And Excel does that very quickly. You can right click here. Right, you don't have to right click here. Once you click here, you see these chart tools and choose layout and click trend line option. Here, trend line, okay, and linear trend line. Right. So Excel quickly calculated the best fitting line and showed you this trend line. This is slightly above the data points because we have this outlier on top, right? So it shows the trend line, okay? So that's a nice way, but you can do a little more than that, right? You can do, go again here, layout here. Okay. Show equation. Where is the show equation? Yeah, here. I think. Show equation. Here. 수식을 차트에 표시. Show equation in the chart. Okay. Here it shows right here, right? So now we have nice looking equation here. So the intercept is 0.31, right? And the slope, no, the intercept 3.35 and slope is 0.31, right? So you can do whatever you want. One thing I would try here is automatic scattergram shows just this. And apparently this one is vertical axis, but it doesn't show what's on the horizontal axis. Okay? And we tried 2008 return versus 3-year return, right? So if you highlight this way, apparently Excel uses the first column as the horizontal axis and the second column as the vertical axis. So if you want, you should be able to change that, right? Let me see if that works. Right click here, data selection. Yeah, you should be able to switch. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'm sure somewhere here in this window you can choose which one goes here, which one goes here, right? So try that, right? And of course you can make it clearer to your audience which one is which. If you want to include the title or legend here to indicate what's on the horizontal axis, what's on the vertical axis, you should be able to do that. Okay? All right. I think we're out of time. Any question? We'll finish this chapter on Thursday. So why don't you read through the chapter? And there are Excel guides at the end of each chapter. So why don't you follow through the Excel guide? Make yourself familiarized. Okay? I'll see you on Thursday.